Hello, Exiles. It's been a long time since I've done one of these, but honestly, 3.26 is shaping up to be pretty exciting. There's a lot of changes being made, and a lot of builds that I played a long time ago before I even started doing any sort of build guides on YouTube are kind of coming back to life because of these changes that were made. In this case, they did absolutely silly things to Elementalist. The new Leash of the Primordial gives us basically the old Golementalist build archetype in a single 2-point cluster, which is awesome because this is not just for summoners. The auto summoning golems and the buffs they provide are actually just insanely powerful. And with a little bit of investment on the tree and 20 quality gems, you basically triple the quality of the buffs. Why is this a big deal? Well, the rest of Elementalist got kind of buffed. The golems themselves got buffed. The buffs that they have now are much stronger. And the skill in question that I'm making this build about, Stormburst, also got buffed. It's not reflected here just yet, but I have it kind of reflected here. This more cast speed thing reflects the change to the cast speed because it goes from a base cast time of 0.25 to 0.2. That's a pretty major bonus to the DPS of a skill. Why Stormburst? Well, in addition to Stormburst getting buffed, channeling skills got buffed. They got this absolutely incredible mastery that gives you a power charge every second while channeling a spell. That's amazing. That is probably the easiest source of power charges on a build, period. I wouldn't be surprised if you got builds that would have a channeling skill just thrown in there so they could spin up with this mastery and blow up bosses real quick. That's probably going to be tech. In this case, we're just going to have them all the time. We get infused channeling, which I've edited the quality on to reflect the buffs to this as well. The less damage taken from hits bonus has gotten a little bit stronger as well, which is just, again, very nice. But all of this kind of comes back to Stormburst at the start, where this skill scales with damage the way you would expect basically every other skill to, in addition to scaling with duration. It's one of the most direct DPS scaling with duration skills out there. Kind of, I think since Firestorm is gone, this might be the only one that does it this directly. Maybe with the exception of like Viper Strike, where it just makes your poisons longer. For that reason, more duration is kind of like one of our top supports. In fact, I almost had a panic attack when I looked through this and I realized there's no room for Arcane Surge. And you're probably like, what are you talking about? You have an extra support here. No, there's a new channeling support that makes the skill cost more mana as it's channeled, but do more damage. And I have that simulated here just to show it at full effect, which is, I mean, again, another reason why this build is like, they really pumped up the support for this skill in particular, it feels like. So let's talk about what makes it go and why the stats over here are pretty good. For starters, the golem buffs are now tremendous, right? This shows you 20% damage, but that's not all. Now it's also 20% AoE. So we have to kind of simulate the bonuses that aren't there over here, and then add the golem effect on top of it. So it's actually 60% AoE, right? 60% defenses comes from the new stone golem buff. 54 mana regenerated per second, just kind of a flat value that's from the new lightning golem buff. The damage here is actually a bit higher because, or rather, there's a little bit more here because the flame golem also got like a buff to its actual offered damage. And then, yeah, this is the new support, and this is the buff to the actual skill itself. So now that all those big numbers that are being added to pad the stats are out of the way and explained, let's talk about how the build survives. Every channeling skill in Path of Exile has the key problem of you have to stand still to do damage, right? It's not like, oh, you have to stand still to cast. No, you have to stand still and stay there to do damage. So you have to be able to stand in the fire on some level, right? Stone Golem of Safeguarding is like the ultimate solution to this. I love this gem so damn much. We get 200% increased Golem effect, so it's basically taking half of the damage from all melee hits. All melee damage incoming is cut in half. That's a defensive layer you can't get anywhere else. It's a big one. To that end, we do have to invest in minion like defenses a little bit on the tree, but that also makes the rest of our golems stronger so that even though they automatically resurrect, when they're alive, they live for longer, and that's a good thing. So we have some notes taken here, we have some notes taken here, just things to give them big life, and then with the supports on them as well, it's just kind of, generally speaking, very hard for them to die in any sort of a way that doesn't give us openings to fight. And then also these notes here give a little bit of golem life. This is also our buff effect and the reason why we can run 4, right? We have 1 baseline, 2 from the Ascendancy, and 1 here. And this Ascendancy is really a big part of what makes this all work, because 2 Ascendancy points for this is the stupidest thing in the game. In fact, this is why this isn't just a build I'm recommending, but also a League starter recommendation, because you can get this as your first Ascendancy. You have 3 Golems giving you double buff effect. Early on in the game, that's like 40% increased damage and 40% AoE from a Flame Golem. It's like 20% cast speed and a bunch of flat mana regen from a Lightning Golem, and then a bunch of life regen and a bunch of defenses from a Stone Golem. That's massive. It solves everything your build could need early on, and then the value of this actually continues onward all the way through endgame. A very rare, incredibly powerful, but I don't know. It might just be overpowered, but I love it. Outside of this, we have to do a lot of work on defenses because the rest of our Ascendancy is basically damage. Shaper of Storms makes it so that even though we're doing small hits, we're going to get a massive shock effect. And the reason why we kind of invest in this is because incidentally, it's very easy for us to get shock effect and pump it up so that 125% immediately becomes a 50% shock, which is 50% increased damage taken, and obviously that's a massive multiplier to add to our setup. Mastermind of Discord, basically kind of synergizing at least early on with Awakened Lightning Pen. I'm sorry, late. This is not early on. Late with Awakened Lightning Pen to give us kind of both a huge bonus to our mana regeneration and also just allow us to absolutely rip a boss to shreds because their resistances mean nothing. This is a complete renege on it, and then conductivity is all bonus damage at that point. And Heart of Destruction. Heart of Destruction plus Flame Golem is kind of the push over the top, I think, that Stormburst needed to kind of not just be really strong, but be really strong in the modern era of the game. When we don't have Convergence, we have 60% increased area of effect. So with a 20% Golem and our nodes on the tree in this, we have 60% AoE, and now this is 120% AoE. If Stormburst has one issue, it's that the AoE isn't very big, and it kind of targets a smaller area. Now the AoE is actually kind of big, so sweeping the skill across the screen to kill everything is going to actually feel all right. And all of that together is going to give it passable clear. I'm not going to call it good clear, because the bar for good clear is pretty high, right? I wouldn't say this is going to outclear Kitava's Thirst, which is going to race around the map like a crackhead, and the moment one detonate dead goes off and hits an enemy corpse, everything around it is dead. This build takes a little longer with the trash, but absolutely melts anything that is supposed to slow you down, right? 5.5 million DPS, and this build is really not optimized yet. This is what I could get done, and honestly, I looked at it and I was like, this is good enough. This is good enough. And even with like all of the good stuff kind of cut out, it still hits 2.6 million DPS without much trouble. That's incredible. Any build that can get to like 1.5 million DPS without really great gear is fantastic in my book. The fact that this gets like well past that is kind of shocking. This is like 1 million DPS over the threshold. And that's on top of it being, you know, relatively survivable. It's not as survivable as I would like. There's still some flaws to it. I think long term, until I can actually sit down and play this build myself, which probably third build this league, to be honest. I have a second build already in mind that I'm not putting out a POB for because you cannot league start that one. This build, though, it does such a tremendous amount of damage, and believe it or not, I haven't gotten to the best part of what makes it so tanky and survivable. That's coming in a moment. We'll talk about that as we get over to the gear. So let's set this back to the endgame setup. Because, admittedly, some of this equipment is very good. Ralakesh's, even though they nerfed it, I'm pretty sure this variant of it is still going to be really expensive. The thing is, it's really expensive for good reason. This is a tremendous amount of survivability, and I don't want to give it up. If we do give it up, it's still okay. It's not as good. Definitely, I would say long term, if you're going to like start really going after difficult content, you're going to need this. But until then, anything up to Pinnacles, this build will probably absolutely eviscerate without these anyway. There's probably some aspirational content it will still eviscerate, I'll be honest. And a big reason for that is the rings. Yeah. Crusader rings are the most busted thing in the game for this skill specifically. And the reason for that is it gives you life per enemy hit with spells. You got 2 of these with 14, and very silly things start to happen. In fact, you know what? This is supposed to be kind of a attainable endgame setup, so I should catalyst these. That is not insane. And that brings it up to 16. Our life leech / on hit rate is 4,623.4 every second, and we have a total life of 5,342. Every second, against a single opponent, you are nearly refilling your entire life bar on life gain on hit. If that doesn't raise your eyebrows a little bit, I don't know what will. So let's pop over to the game real quick. I have my old Kitava's Thirst character from one of the things last league here, and I threw Stormburst on it so you could see what it looks like. And this is it kind of normally. It's not the best showcase because this is level 1 gem. I did quality it so that it would have the extra base duration, and we get a little bit of duration naturally from the Ascendancy, so it kind of shows you what it's doing. Basically, each one of these balls continues to jump and deal damage for every 0.4 second breakpoint you reach. For this reason, you want duration, but only if you're hitting, you know, the next breakpoint so that it can jump an extra time. And that combined with cast speed causes them to just keep stacking up, and you can see it's hitting many, many times. And if we get a lot of cast speed, like if I actually use my Ascendancy to spin up my cast speed to a silly amount, and then I start doing it, we are now at almost 20 instances. 20 orbs jumping every 0.4 seconds. That's 80, I'm sorry, no, that's... That's awesome. I don't care who you are, that's awesome. And obviously you can see why, if we have the right stuff, this build basically has some of the best recovery around, in kind of a surprising way. The downside, of course, being you have to be casting to do it, but because we also have a Stone Golem, we actually have like 10% life regen, which is also just very, very nice. If you combine the two values, we are actually basically regenerating our entire life pool every second. Now, personally, I stuck for comfort while I was designing the build. I noticed that all of the uniques I wanted were armor energy shield bases, so I was like, okay, we'll get a good we'll get a good armor energy shield body armor. We'll take this mastery and we'll have a great time about it, right? It's going to boost our armor. It's going to give us a non-zero amount of energy shield, which is great for bossing because this tends to be relevant way more often for mitigating big attacks. And then, of course, my usual chicanery of going for like some reduced extra damage taken from critical strikes investment goes in there to round everything out. We've got a shield. I kind of went for block, even though we can't really block cap on this character. We still get to like 60-40, which is, that's big, right? It's not a small amount. It's definitely helping, and it will definitely make the mapping experience feel much smoother. I would say don't shirk on this, but you know, some of the other advantages, we don't really need to worry about things like recoup in this build. We just need to invest in a little bit of block and a little bit of minion survivability, and we're off to the races. All of this, again, still doesn't include proper optimization long-term. I haven't really looked at how to make use of an Animate Guardian or Spectres, because when you have some minion survivability investment and low socket pressure, which this build actually kind of does have, you can get away with that. I'm not entirely sure how to make all of that work, but Animate Guardian or Spectres, or maybe even both, could be fit in this build on top of everything to like give us even more punch and survivability and power. I do have a note section here. It's not as detailed as my usual ones because, again, this build is a bit experimental. The big issue being I've played Stormburst in the past, right? The things like the life gain on hit from spells and whatnot, all of that's been tested and works great. However, there are expected weaknesses and expected strengths to kind of go over and consider. They're all listed here. The biggest concern I have is probably how the clear is going to feel. It shouldn't feel bad, especially with all of the AoE we're getting, but it might possibly be a lot better, right? There's obviously the potential for an impulses. In fact, do we have enough dexterity to... Yeah, we do have enough dexterity to equip it currently in the build setup. So it might be possible that you can throw this on and use it in maps, and that's just better, right? I wouldn't use it for bosses. I would still go for something like I've got listed here, but this is very good. Impulse is giving the shock explosions, and then because we have a decent amount of lightning damage, probably pumps up the survivability on the build quite a bit. One of the other big issues with it is we kind of are locked in, and I haven't set this yet, to like your usual ailment fixing pantheons. I haven't quite gone through how to fix this yet. And it might be doable, right? I think it might just be a lot of pressure on our rings and maybe needing to move points around to get stuff here. And then that would let us go for Lunaris. And the reason why Lunaris is good is because you avoid projectiles that chain. And because we're going to have golems out all the time, chaining projectiles is scary. So without that fixed, you probably want to avoid that map mod. Another note, just to assuage some fears, Convergence is not active. So it says 5.5 million here. It actually goes quite higher when you're fighting a boss. So the rest of the gear is pretty straightforward. Crowd of the Inward Eye is just a lot of damage and survivability and armor and energy shield, and that's pretty great considering we're one auring it with Determination and Eternal Blessing, and we're even going for Sublime Vision for the extra endurance charge. Again, this is properly late game equipment. This is an Uber Shaper drop, so if you're in Soul of Self-Found, probably not your concern, but with Ralakesh's, with the one we pick up from the tree, that's really good. That's 20% physical damage reduction and 20% elemental damage reduction. And the elemental damage reduction is what we actually care about, because I haven't really found the best way to fix our resistance situation. 76% is like, right? It's really not good. If I could get this up to like 80%, I wouldn't feel so much about Ralakesh's, especially considering that's essentially what Ralakesh is doing in this scenario, is it's giving us 5 max res. Outside of that, the jewels are pretty well rolled, I won't lie, and you want them well rolled, but I think that's a fairly acceptable kind of thing to be chasing for in the late game. The amulet is good, but I didn't like go for a crazy +2 or anything. Obviously, you're probably not going to have it quite this ideal. The important thing about these amulets is you want exceptional performance allocated. That's this node here. It is the cheaper of the duration nodes. I believe, yeah, it's basically just the black oil to get it going, and it's worth 16% DPS. That said, if you could actually path here yourself, these 2 minor duration nodes would also be worth another 8%, and that's because of how hitting certain breakpoints with the duration scaling on the gem works. But at a certain point, you might have to cast the skill for longer than it can spin up to realistically to actually get the DPS you're promised, so that should also be considered. There is a lot of places in the game where you can get more increased skill effect duration, and again, this build has not really been optimized for that. This build has been optimized to function in ways that I know it will, because potentially there's like a whole other way to build it where you go over here and you find ways to fix your minion survivability and whatnot along the way, and you go evasion spell suppression, which might just have much better defenses for this kind of a build. But personally, I would rather have the armor, and a big part of that is you want to reduce incoming damage, you want to reduce the odds that you're getting stunned, because getting stunned is very frustrating on a channeling build. So we're looking to mitigate the damage that's incoming so we can keep pushing forward, because again, we have like tremendous recovery gain in the middle of combat, and we really don't want to have it so that if we get hit one time, it interrupts our flow and the next hit comes in and crushes us. This won't do that. This will fight through, right? The effective hit pool is actually rather decent, I think, especially for a build like this. The Fizz max hit is nice. The I believe even without the melee golem, this thing tanks Shaper Slam. With the melee golem, you probably tank multiple Shaper Slams at once, which is pretty silly. And like the last thing to go over is the Brutal Restraint. I kind of went with this because it gives us a bunch of dexterity, so we don't have to worry about the stat in kind of the ultra late game situation. The other stats kind of come naturally, and it can give us some very useful bits and bobbles along the way, like max life. This one in particular, I think, is max life oriented. There's some critical strike chance, which is another big one, and some movement speed. All very good things you can get on these. I have kind of a bunch here, and I doubt I've even found the best one yet. I kind of just picked this one because it was rather generic. I didn't want to pick one that looked like insanely good. And okay, last item I haven't talked about yet was Command of the Pit. I picked this because of the 2 Abyssal sockets, because Abyssal Jewels are a great way to pursue a little bit of extra stats and maybe some crit going on. Again, these are kind of just generically good stats that suited the build as I was building it here. I don't necessarily know that you're going to want to do them like this, but I think you're going to want to look for crit. It also gives us Arcane Surge on hit, which is good because, believe it or not, we don't have the socket pressure to fit Arcane Surge naturally very easily. And then it also gives us cast speed, max life, and of course it is an armor energy shield base, so it satisfies our mastery requirements. Speaking of masteries, we still don't entirely know what all of the masteries are going to do going forward in the game. When it comes to rune grafting, right? The new ones that are coming from... That's so weird that we're getting new content from Settlers League in 3.26. It never left, guys. But we have a lot of open masteries, so if you wanted to do something with rune grafts, because we end up having a good one, the space is absolutely available in this build. It probably wouldn't even be remotely difficult to squeeze it in. These points here specifically, very easy to cut out. I guess you could cut out Shaper. I wouldn't. I would probably keep that. There's probably some damage nodes on the tree currently that aren't the most important, although generally speaking, this is a very dense, efficient tree, that does a lot with how it's organized. So I don't know how easy it is to switch away from what we've got going here. Just, oh, and all right, a Light of Meaning, sorry. A lightning damage one, because again, dense place, I think this gem, yeah, it's worth about 20% of our DPS, which is 20% DPS for a gem slot is pretty good. Sorry, jewel slot. Anyway, that's the build, or how I hope it will function. Let me know what you think. Tell me if you plan on starting it. I'm definitely going to be checking daily on YouTube in case people run into problems with it, because of course I'm playing Kitava's Thirst to start, and then I'm using that to fund myself for a different build. This will be build number 3 though, because I feel like of all the builds I've looked at so far, this one might have the best bossing potential. There's a few problems to fix, and maybe I have to reorient how I think about where on the tree I'm investing, right? I might have to go over here for kind of an evasion setup, but I'm hoping that's not necessary. I'm pretty sure the massive recovery rate will carry a lot of it. There are some things that could make this build better, just like inherently, like if we could get any sort of energy shield on hit, our actual effective life pool would get much larger in many situations. But overall, because we're functioning on kind of my usual top left side tribrid defenses, where we're making use of everything, the build should be stocky, at least out to T16s for sure. It's gonna smash through that stuff, no problem. There's so many ways to deal with that level of incoming damage. T17s, I have a feeling this build is going to smoke the bosses and then have a lot of trouble maybe clearing, because the clear demands in those maps are quite strenuous. But with enough DPS, it should be fine long term, and it's not like we're without block, we're just not as good as we could be. Obviously, this, like something, I don't know, even like Svalin maybe long term that could be looked at. And of course, I haven't really looked into, checked, or optimized for things like cluster jewels, or hunting more jewel sockets, just in general on the tree. Because a lot of these stats probably aren't the absolute most efficient that I've highlighted and taken, but they are all pretty good. I'll be perfectly honest, they are all pretty good. All right, I've rambled for way too long. This was supposed to be a short showcase and maybe draw some attention to the build in case someone thought it was interesting. The POV will be down below, and until next time, have a good one, Exiles.